Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today's video is a bit different than what I usually do. Last weekend it was Batman Day and I decided to celebrate it or commemorate it by doing a live stream on Twitch and on YouTube simultaneously. I drew 3 different pictures of Batman and this is the first one that I did. I don't usually show you the pencil work in the videos because it's very rough. It's the skeleton or the basis of the drawing, so I don't think it's that interesting. And also, most of the times you can barely see it. I try to work very light with the pencil, especially if I'm doing watercolors, because I want to be able to erase them without any problems. So I usually just skip the pencils and go straight for the inking. But this time, since I started with the live stream, I started from scratch. Now I'm inking the picture and you can begin to see that there's a lot of influence from the animated series, of course. That's the one I grew up with. And it's usually what I think of when I think of Batman. I mentioned in the live stream that some of the most difficult things to get right when you draw Batman are the ears, getting them straight, getting them even. It's kind of hard. I got it a bit crooked there, but I was able to correct it later during the inking stage. The other thing is the emblem. I was doing a 90s style emblem, which is within the oval. It's very difficult to get the proportions right, and a lot of artists have a hard time doing it. I think that I could have done better, but I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. It definitely could have been worse. So I did do a bit of a grid to get them as straight as I could, as symmetric as I could. I think that's what makes it so difficult, the fact that it's these compound curves, but it has to be symmetrical, so it can be rather difficult. Another thing I mentioned is nowadays I'm a lot more comfortable with the fact that I don't do straight lines. It's impossible for me to draw a straight line just with my hand. I always do very wavy lines, and before that used to affect me a lot. It used to make me very insecure about my drawing, but I have learned to embrace it and be fine with it. You know, it's just part of my personal style, and it makes it a lot more enjoyable, because drawing should be about joy. The moment that you're drawing and you're not enjoying it, I don't think it's worth it. So being able to embrace the fact that I can't do straight lines made it a lot less stressing for me. I decided to go for very, very bold lighting. You can see these very deep shadows and the very light areas, the chiaroscuro. For a character like Batman, this is just perfect. This very dramatic lighting is very, very good. Very appropriate. And of course it helps when you're inking. It helps you cover big areas of the character. So in case you made a mistake or whatever, it's easier to cover it. Sometimes I don't draw Batman as much as I would like to. And the reason is the lack of color. I mentioned in other videos that what I enjoy about watercolor is the vibrancy of the colors and doing very colorful characters. But Batman is, of course, a very dark character. He doesn't have a lot of color, so I usually go for other characters that are a bit more colorful. In this case, I took a chance with the ink, and I have this gray watercolor. I wasn't sure if I should use it because this isn't watercolor paper. It's a lot thinner, and I was afraid that the paper might bulk or that it might rip. But it was alright in the end. I didn't use as much water as I would normally do because of that. But in the end it worked out. It worked out fine. I did use some more watercolor in the background, and you'll see that later. But I didn't want to risk using a lot of water because of that. And here I'm gonna do the emblem with colored pencil because of the same reason. For this yellow to work, I would have needed to use a lot more pigment and a lot more water with the watercolor, so I didn't want to risk the paper ripping, so I went for a colored pencil. I'm not a big fan of using colored pencils. There's some artists who can do beautiful things with them, but I've just never been able to get the colors that I want or the effects that I want. It's just too difficult for me, so I usually go for watercolor, especially if I have to cover a big area. That's another problem for me with the colored pencils. But in this case, because it isn't such a big area, I can cover it pretty well, and you can barely see the strokes. It was fine just to do it with this. Here with the same shade, the exact same color, I'm gonna do a bit of shading, just applying a bit more pressure, making the color a bit more intense, which is the same as I would do with watercolor, but the physics of it are a lot different, of course. During the live stream, I wasn't sure which color to use, so I asked the people who were watching, and they suggested purple. Purple is not only my favorite color, but it's also quite ingrained into the history of Batman. If you've ever read the very first Batman comic book, Detective Comics number 27, you'll see that he wears these tiny purple gloves. So it is very appropriate, and it's a color that they have incorporated into the design in recent years in the comic books. So here again, I am using watercolor, but I'm not using as much water as I would normally use, and this results in a very light shade, but it turned out pretty well. Remember that if you would like to support me on Patreon, you will be able to download this image and the other 2 images I did for the live stream. Thank you so much for watching, and stay safe. I'll see you next time.